And that's done in habit.
Okay, I'd like to call this meeting of the Madison Board of Selectmen to order on Monday, July 8, 2019 at 6:30 p.m. Please join me in saluting the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let the record show Selectman Elias is absent. Consent agenda, warrant number 34, 6/24/19, number 35, 6/24/19, payroll register number 26, 6/27/19, and number 27, 7/3/19.
Move to approve.
We have a motion and a second to approve the warrants and payroll registers as read. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? All in favor, the motion carries. All right, we have acceptance of the meeting minutes. I'm sorry, I'm wrong. Okay, we have an application for catering permit for Half Acre Nightclub. It is a wedding at,
It's at the Fairy Tale Gardens on East Madison Road. It's a wedding ceremony in September. So they're from Brewer, Half Acre Incorporated, that's the signature paper. And they will be serving wine and beer, so they need to have approval to have a liquor/catering license.
How long is that good for?
Until the day of that wedding. It's just it's a
That day.
license to do business outside of their regular place to do business.
For that day?
Right.
Okay.
looking for a motion.
So moved.
Second. All right, motion and a second to grant an application for catering permit to Half Acre Nightclub. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? All in favor, the motion carries. All right, D, acceptance of the meeting minutes of June 24th, 2019.
So moved, read.
Second. I have a motion and a second to accept the meeting minutes of June 24th, 2019. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? All in favor, the motion carries. Are we up to date on our minutes?
When Mr. Elias gets back, we'll still
We'll
have
do
to
that.
go back
All right.
and do the
Yep.
June 3rd, I think.
Okay.
Minutes.
All right, old business, Mr. Moody?
None for me.
Mr. Savage? Mr. Duchamp? No. Okay, items of communication, Mr. Town Manager?
Just a couple things to remind you of. The next select board meeting on the 22nd of July will be over at the East Madison Fire Station. So just be aware of that. The deadline for the town's matching grant applications is the 17th. So those applications, once they come in, they'll be reviewed by the board at that meeting in East Madison on the 22nd. At the last meeting, the board approved the loan to GoLab at the former Madison paper site. So that paperwork has been drawn up. I saw a draft of it. It was drawn up by Ken Lexier, attorney out of Skowhegan, does a lot of work for us. And he has sent it off to GoLab's legal folks to have them take a look at it. So that's where that process is at the moment. And I did reach out, there was a request at the last Selectmen's meeting to look into the housing TIF that Skowhegan passed at their town meeting. So Jeff Hewitt, their economic development director, he and I emailed back and forth, and when he has the document done, he's gonna share it with me so we can kind of compare that to a more typical TIF that we have. And that is all I have.
Thank you. All right, new business, department heads report. Jeff?
Not a whole lot. The guys have been coming back from vacation and are time off due to the July 4th holiday. The new truck that we've ordered is in Bangor and will be shipped to Lewiston tomorrow to get the plow gear and the dump body on. Had a little guardrail project over on the lower Mills Road over the Western Onset Stream at the lower part of the end of the road that's been needed to be done, and it finally got finished last month. Doing some pipe projects up on the Colby Bryant Road Fine line paving, we'll start paving the roads, Preble Avenue, Colby Bryant, Schuster Road tomorrow, and we'll do the River Road in August. We'll be working on Foss Road and Tupper Road with some gravel that we purchased and have stockpiled up to the garage, along with some light ditching on the Tupper Road and Bagley roads. And hopefully, if everything goes well, do some crack sealing on the Ward Hill Road and replace some culverts on the Walker Road, and then obviously replace our huge loss of winter sand last year from the horrible winter that we had. The roadside mowing will be done sometime here at the end of the month. I called the gentleman today. He didn't return my call, so I'm guessing the end of July to get the weeds down. We did run out to the greenhouse this morning. There was some concern about some of the grass and stuff. Jerry Lynch does our spraying, has a contract for 3 years. Here's the scope of the work that he's doing and what he does. I put a phone call in this afternoon. He did not return my call, but normally, historically, I believe it's August 1st that he starts that. And that's all I got.
And just to clarify, Jerry Lynch's work is sidewalks.
Sidewalks,
And
curbs,
the other guy you're waiting on is to cut
is
the
to do the
grass out.
out in the country, on our town roads, yes.
Somebody's out mowing this,
Yeah, we normally take care of the end of the old county road and the intersection of 148, just because that grass goes so fast and high, and it's kind of a hazard pulling in. I mean, that intersection's dangerous enough as it is, and by the time the state gets there, it's usually August, and then we make a pass up the river road to past the greenhouse, just to make things a little neater in case anybody wants to show up there.
What about it? Golf course road in 43.
That will be done when they come and mow in another couple weeks.
Okay, this is not very visible. Not very visible there. That's all.
No, it isn't, and a lot of those intersections intersect with state roads, and they don't get their program going depending when they get started, so.
All right. Anything else? Okay, we have the report from our fire chief. We have the report from the police.
And then I also added a report from code officer. I put it right on the planning board agenda. I just want to refer to a couple things. We don't often get code officer updates. The reason I put it on the planning board, a copy of the agenda, is they meet tomorrow night, and their third item on their new business is to get some training from Maine Municipal, and that is something that this board has strongly encouraged, and I just wanted to let you know that Susan and the planning board is trying to follow through with that and keep them trained as best as she can. So the other thing is, we did some comparisons, and everybody's busy, and I'm sure other code officers in other towns are busy, but we've issued 56 building permits through June 30th this year. Last year we issued 29, so it's almost double. And plumbing permits are 35 issued compared to 15. So there's a lot of activity out there going on. So the new fee schedule is in place as of July 1st. And Susan and I had talked about this last year, and the business certainly warrants it. She's going to change her hours starting August 12th, and she'll work a full day in the office on Mondays and a full day in the office on Wednesdays. Right now, she's just there full day Monday, half day Thursday. But she's going to add those extra hours, and we budgeted for it. But the demand for building permits and that type of work is certainly warranted. The only other thing I was going to draw to your attention, the fire, on the back page, the new set of Jaws of Life they received in April, they've used it 4 times since April. So certainly that equipment is worth the investment.
All right. Number 2, review selectmen assessors meeting schedule.
So in your packet, there should be a proposed schedule that runs through August of next year. I've tried to schedule in quarterly meetings in East Madison. I tried to touch on holidays that fall on Mondays, like Columbus Day and Veterans Day, Memorial Day. Try to make adjustments for those. And you'll also see that right now, scheduled on August 12th is the assessors meeting to set the tax rate and set the tax commitment. Talking with Shirley, it looks like that we are on track to have everything in place for that meeting. So, and I don't recall if we need a motion to accept this, or just take it as information.
All right, number 3, discuss franchise fee funding for Somerset Community Television, Channel 11.
So in your packets, I think Tammy printed out an account status, looks something like that. And essentially what that shows on the far right-hand side, as far as the credits, these are the franchise fees that come in quarterly. And you can see they run from $48, $49, $44, $4,200. And then on the next column over to the left, that's the amount that the town pays of the Channel 11 budget, and it's split up into quarterly payments of just over $5,000. So I brought this to the board's attention over the last couple of years as the trend continues that there's less and less people subscribing to cable television. And even though Beeline sells internet and phone services, the franchise agreement and the franchise fees is only for cable television. So as the number of subscribers goes down, those franchise fees go down. And although Channel 11 and Mr. Moody's on their board, they've held their budget the same for the last several years, the amount of money coming in is going down. So there's about a $1,500 delta this year. We did budget $1,000 in community services, so we applied that, but we're still about $500 short of that. And so we'll just run that line over this year. It doesn't really impact much of that article. But I just wanted the board to be aware, and perhaps if you wanted to discuss options in the future, if you wanted to direct the Channel 11 board to discuss options, or if you just want to continue to add money into the community services line to bridge that gap, we'll have to do it. We actually raised the budget from $1,000 to $1,500 in this current budget, which would be close, but I had a trending chart here somewhere that shows the numbers continually to go down. Now, every once in a while, Beeline Cable will bump their rates. And when they bump their rates, even though the number of subscribers goes down, then the, oh, here it is, right? I got copies for you. It gives a little bump, but my fear, and Tammy and I have talked about this, is if that budget stays, our portion of the budget stays at $20,000, and those franchise fees drop to $4,000 a quarter, then you've got about a $35,000 or $4,000 gap at the end of the year. And so how much does the taxpayer want to fund Channel 11? And really, Skowhegan and Anson are in the same boat, because they just have, Anson has a smaller portion, Skowhegan has a much larger portion of the budget, but they're not getting enough franchise fees to cover it. I've had this spreadsheet for years, I just kind of broke it down. You can see back in 2012, there were a total of 3,200 between Anson, Madison, and Skowhegan number of Beeline cable subscribers. And as of March of this year, that's down to 1,851, so that's about a 45% drop. So you can see the numbers in Madison. We used to have 1,000 subscribers in Madison, now we have 558. So it's something that I believe that the Channel 11 board is probably going to have to address, and maybe this board and other Skowhegan and Anson boards will have to address. One thing that everyone's always been reluctant to do is to raise the percentage of that franchise fee. Because right now, I believe you're allowed to collect 5%, and I believe you're only collecting at a rate of 3% right now. So if you raise that franchise fee, you could take in more money, but that fee is passed along to the customer. And so essentially, you'd be making a decision to raise everybody's cable bill.
Then you raise the cable bill, your subscribers drop off.
Exactly.
No, we're dropping off at a 45% pace here. I don't know how much we need to raise that.
Yeah.
What is it? I mean, I think that this is something in the budget process that, you know, we'll look again in March or April when we start talking about that, and how much is it going to be for next year. That's what I think we need to take a look at. I think it's pretty well covered for this year.
And I think that what you're gonna find is when we get to that budget conversation is instead of talking about 500 to 1,500, we'll be talking about 4,000 to 5,000 to cover that. And if that's something that the board wants to bring to the voters at town meeting.
Any other questions? All right, number 4, discuss policy for notary services.
I put in the packet a draft that Tammy and Kathy and I kind of looked at and put together. And we looked through all of the archives. The town office has offered notary services for years. And every once in a while, a resident or even a non-resident will come in and have to have something notarized. Tammy and Kathy are the veteran notaries. There is a rookie notary at the town office that's cutting his teeth still. And so far, I don't think I've authorized anything illegal. But as notaries, when you apply at the state, you agree to their terms and certifications, and one of those is performing weddings. Maine's one of only 2 states where a notary can perform a wedding. Every once in a while, someone will request to get a marriage license and have the wedding performed immediately, right there. In the past, we didn't have a policy regarding whether or not the town office would perform a wedding during regular business hours. So after talking between the notaries at the office, we would like to recommend that our policy would simply say that we do not do weddings during regular business hours. Arrangements may be made between a notary who happens to work at the town office to officiate a wedding outside of business hours, and that notary may charge a fee for those services. We all agree that during the business day, we don't really have the capacity or the space to even perform the briefest of wedding ceremonies. And so we'd rather not do that on town time, on town property. But if someone were to push back at us and say, you're a notary, you have to perform a wedding, we would need to have a policy in place that would say, we don't do it during business hours. And you can make arrangements to schedule a time to do it with someone after hours.
I think it's a good policy.
And I think Tammy brought it up, and she noted up at the top there that this would be a policy that would be added as an appendix to the personnel policy. Because really this does cover the actions of the people who are notaries at the town office, which would be our employees.
So there's nothing that needs to go to town meeting then?
No.
Okay. So we're looking for a motion to update the policy of notary services, which would be Appendix 5, Policy D.
Oh, that's actually personnel policy.
Personnel policy real quick.
I'll make that a motion, and then I have a question.
All right. Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second to update the personnel policy regarding notary services. And questions?
Do we pay for the notary?
When you get the certification,
Yeah.
is that what you're talking about? Yes, the town does reimburse us when we
Okay.
apply.
I
to
just-
town. Yeah,
I just wanted to,
'Cause I think-
at the bank, they pay for our notary.
And
I have
for
to
the
be a
seal.
notary.
And for the seal.
the town, okay, the town provides the seal too, okay.
Yeah. You don't have to use that anymore. You
I like that, that's the best part of the whole thing. It's just sitting down there.
We'll have to do a detail.
don't. Use it how you want. Pretty soon you'll want a stamp. Done.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, all those in favor of upgrading the policy? All in favor, the motion carries. All right. Number 5, discuss tax lien poverty abatement process.
So just by way of information, the 30-day lien notices for unpaid 2018 taxes will go out this Friday, July 12th. That'll be the 30-day notice, and so if those folks don't get those taxes paid, then they'll get a lien basically placed on that in August. As you may have been aware, one of the last actions of Governor LePage was to pass legislation that protected folks that are over 65 living in their own homes. And part of that adds language to the lien notice. This is an example in your packet of what the lien notice looks like. And from about the fourth line down where it says upon request, and all the way through that address of the Consumer Credit Protection Agency in Augusta, that's all new language. One of the things towns are watching is, will this new language bring an uptick in people that will apply for a poverty abatement? And a poverty abatement is different from an abatement that says you've valued my property in error. A poverty abatement comes directly to the selectmen, and you have to consider, based on the information, whether that person is not able to make their tax payments and make a reduction based on that. I don't know if you saw it. If not, I made copies, but in the last edition of the Maine Town and City, there was a good 4-page article on tax poverty abatements that might be helpful, so I made copies for the board. I just wanted to make the board aware of it. When someone applies for a poverty abatement, they fill out a form that's similar to our general assistance forms. And they have to share all their income and all their expenses, and they have to really document the reason why they can't afford to pay their taxes. Once I accept that application, it doesn't go through general assistance. It goes directly to the select board, so I have to accept that application. Once I accept that application, then the board has 30 days to act on it. So,
We've done a couple of those. I've done a couple of
Yep.
those, yeah. Yep, fine.
How do you validate that information?
well, that's one of the reasons they give you 30 days, is that you should do an interview with the person and go over the application and determine, just like they do with general assistance, where you ask a lot of questions. Unfortunately, it's a pretty broad spectrum, and I try to let people know that this really, really, really has to be a desperation situation for the board to approve it.
But you've got to validate it somehow to not issue one of these. In other words, if a person comes in there and they say they don't have any money in the bank, or they don't have whatever their income is, that's gotta be validated so that they are proven to us that they are in poverty.
Right. And there are certain things you can ask for. You can ask for statements, you can ask for pay stubs and deposit tickets and that sort of thing, but again, you're kind of limited into what you can do, similar to GA.
I think the one we've had here before, one or two, we've had all those statements have been brought in, and all those statements have been brought here when they got to the board to go over that. So, and then, I know we didn't go, I'm assuming that at the time, the town manager checked those out. I don't believe it was Tim, I don't think you've ever done all those, have you? Well, we actually went through that and had statements for that, yeah. I believe we even denied it.
Okay.
So I just want to make the board aware. We'll do our best to try to facilitate them at the town office, but it's been the conversation around municipalities that this type of language that's in this notice may create an uptick of people asking for it.
I'm sure.
So I'm gonna break more work.
Unfortunately, right?
All right, number 6, discuss setting parking fines.
Okay, so at town meeting, the vehicles and traffic ordinance updates passed. And one of the things that did was it gave the select board the authorization to set parking fines for violations. So in your packet, there should be a couple of pages for consideration. Let me just start by saying that I believe, and I've talked with Sharon from the Sheriff's Office and with Jeff, and this may be a longer conversation than just tonight. And I don't want to rush into this because trying to get enforcement right, trying to get signs right is not something that we really want to rush into. So there's a couple of different things here. One is parking prohibited, no parking. That should be fairly straightforward and fairly easy to enforce, as opposed to a time-limited parking, like 2 hours. The changes to the ordinance eliminated 30-minute parking and 1-hour parking, so there's just no parking and 2-hour parking. And you see in your handouts there where the no parking is, and really that's the way it's always been. We didn't really change many no parking areas. Has to do with on certain sides of Main Street as you go up past Skowhegan Savings, right in front of Nichols Street at the junior high. We did add 50 feet back of the entrance at Dunkin' Donuts so that you get a little more space at the entrance of Dunkin' Donuts. There's no parking on the opposite side of the street on Preble Avenue from the recreational ball fields, so that people don't park on both sides of the street there. So that, I think, is pretty straightforward, and we can probably put signs together for that. The question I had for the board is, do you want that to be a parking fine or a parking violation that the vehicle may be towed at the owner's expense? I'm just talking about no parking right now, I'm not talking about 2-hour parking.
I guess, my opinion on this right here is to educate the town as much as we can throughout this year via warnings or what have you, with a stipulation that come January 1, it'll be enacted. Then it's not a surprise to anybody, okay? And even, put something on Channel 11, just educate the local people or all the people in the town of what's gonna happen. And then there's no question when it comes back. I don't like just going out there one day and all of a sudden, I gotta pay a fine.
Right.
But I think by educating the people, you're gonna get better compliance.
Okay.
You mentioned signs, I'm assuming all these locations are gonna have the signs and the penalties, or no?
I think that we would kind of prioritize it and then kind of work our way down. And ultimately, you would have a sign that has the penalty in the sign to make it easier for enforcement. And I think you could probably work under the spirit of the law, and enforcement could use a warning, and then if there's multiple offenses, you could enact the punishment.
Well, as we talked about, you put the sign up and hope for 85% compliance because the sign's gonna do its job. What's the warning or ticket gonna do if it's in a spot that you need it removed from?
Right.
It's not gonna solve your problem at that moment. Then the problem is enforcing that. So say the green car is maybe in that spot a lot, they got their warning, and then it may get towed, and then the blue car goes there and the person's busy and not able to enforce it. Person in the green car is gonna be upset that the blue car didn't get their ticket or tow. Enforcement is the biggest issue.
There's no question, Sharon, it's gonna be a nightmare for
Yes.
whoever's going to enforce this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I figured, it doesn't take much to figure that out when we started this thing,
Yes.
that you're gonna have so many areas to warrant attention. You haven't even come close, and the deputies that are out there working, I mean, they're prioritizing things, and that's gonna be way at the bottom of the list.
Well, you actually have a really good resource because you worked for Madison for how long and previously, I'm sure there were, maybe back in the day, better signage. So, and how did you deal with it, and taking parking tickets and taking in the funds from those, and then,
He-
yes.
And that's true, but if you, I mean, look at your own statistical data that you turn over to us. The complaints that they're answering are not going down
No,
at all. So that means they got less time to do this type of enforcement.
correct.
You know, I have no, I have no idea, I have no suggestion on how this is going to be enforced. I sure as heck wouldn't want to be the one out there chasing around town looking for these.
Right.
And as
You know,
you
it's easy
stated,
when Skowhegan, they had a street man who was chalking them.
and they
that was easy.
eliminated that because of the fact that it was not cost prohibitive, it wasn't,
Right.
there was a reason why they eliminated the meter maid or parking attendant, whatever term you want to use for that. And then asking the patrol person to take on the task also wasn't gonna work. So, like you suggested though, even just if you put the signs up and just try to work with your signage. See how it goes. And then you're looking for compliance. So a sign,
Exactly.
you're looking for compliance. So if it does 85% of its job by just hanging there, is that enough? I don't know.
And that's gonna be a testing process.
Sure.
There's no question about it. And I know, I've been in town and to get a haircut, and there's a concerned person that's making a living, and he says, see that car right there? It goes over to Madison 1,
Yeah.
and it parks there for 3 hours, and people think that I'm busy in here, so they come back, I'll come back another day. Well, another day, it's there again. You know, I think in those situations, the businesses and the schools probably are the priorities to start with, but I still say that, you know, until January 1, we need to try to educate this town on this new ordinance via signs. You know, and hopefully that, you know, people will look at those signs and say, well, I really don't want to spend $50 or $25 today.
Once we start signing this up, how long will this take? I mean, we start tomorrow, we start going and purchasing these signs, or we have them, how long will
Well,
that, how long is that
let's see,
gonna
here's
take?
my suggestion, if we're gonna put these signs up, signs are expensive to make. Those particular signs, I believe, are around $30, $35 a piece, okay? So if we put a no parking out on this side of the road, fine is whatever you guys set, $25. Install that sign, but as Mr. Moody says, let's educate the people, but let's not start till January 1st. So let's say, for example, out on the beach road, north side of the road, there's no parking. There's a vehicle parked there. The deputy goes out, there's a complaint, gee, sir, you're not supposed to park here, give him a warning, let him go on his way. After January 1st, hopefully you've educated most of your people in 5 to 6 months' time, and then go from there.
So on Beach Road and, Thomas Street, North Street, I mean, there's not really a business there that is being impacted. I think it's next 2-hour parking section here, that's gonna impact the businesses on, how are we gonna handle those on Main Street? I mean, I got the same lecture that he did, looking at pictures of the lecture.
Well, let's just do the no parking for right now on
Okay,
this particular
right.
road. So let's post those signs,
Yep.
and then have the deputies, if there is a complaint, if it's before January 1, give out a warning, you know, and then after January 1, then start enforcing.
I think that's fine.
No?
No, I'm just that there's definitely a lot to it. Main Street being your biggest problem, is that that would,
Well, let's get
that's,
to, we'll get to that
We don't
next.
want to jump.
We don't wanna get to
2
that
hours
next. I jumped too quick.
Okay.
So, I think Mr. Venziano's question was, part of it was how fast is the turnaround time between the time you decide what you want the sign to look like and actually having it and putting it up?
A couple weeks on the signs, depending on how many they have to make, and then the installation. You know, there again, it takes time to put signs up.
So we should be up by the first part of August. Middle of August?
I would push more closer to September.
Okay,
to
so
be on
that's
the
gonna give
safe
you
side.
September, October, November, December, to get a feel of what's happening.
Well, maybe you start enforcing in March.
No, I think January would probably be good.
I would also suggest that you think about your municipal lots, because you have the two. So, better educating people where else they can go.
Right.
So, there is a sign for the one that is behind the Irving.
There's a couple down behind Rennie's.
They're behind, maybe a little bit more exposure on the main street, so when they get ready to park, say, well, it'd just be easier if I just go into municipal. I won't have to worry about moving. So if you, again, if you can get them to be more compliant, to automatically go into municipal instead of automatically parking on your main street. So, you do have a large municipal lot and then a smaller one. So if you can let them know that, hey, that's where you should be if you're gonna be ours.
Lucia?
My question would be, and it would have to do with the 2 hour, but it would also have to do with the no parking. If an officer sees somebody there, let's say we get through this warning period and all the rest of that stuff, if we say the penalty is you're gonna get towed, does the officer just call the record and have it towed, or do they put a ticket on the window and call the tow guy and, or?
Again, part of the
Alternate-
problem,
the
how are you gonna
alternate piece.
dictate that they've already had a warning, they've already had a parking ticket, maybe they've had 2 parking tickets, maybe it's for different locations, so are you gonna
Well, and
be,
that
logging.
piece too, that's what concerns me about towing somebody's vehicle, but then the flip side of that is if you have a parking fine, who's collecting the fine? How does that work? And what is that process? If I park,
Right.
somewhere where I'm gonna get a ticket, out here on Preble Avenue, because I'm on the wrong side of the road, and well,
Sure.
yeah, I'm in a football game or something, and the officer comes by and says, I see his truck, he's gonna get a ticket, I go, pull the ticket off my windshield, okay, well, say the fine's $25, well, where do I go? District court, do I go to the town office? I mean, those are.
Generally, that would be on your, however you want it made up that it does that, I would suggest a mail-in, but it would give instructions.
But I'm not sure what from an ordinance perspective, what the thought process on that was.
Well, the thought process was to have that discussion at this level,
Okay.
so that the selectmen could determine the fine, how much, how it would be enforced, where the money would go, where would you go to pay for it. So that's why I'm saying that this conversation will take more
And
than just tonight.
who's going to be responsible for it? That's a really good point. Or is that something that you're gonna ask me or that position at the sheriff's office to take care of? Is that a municipal thing because it's a parking ticket? I usually handle the criminal type of stuff and not your municipal
Right,
type
and
of
that's,
things.
and that's kind of what I'm thinking, but I'm just wondering from a town office perspective, you know, if this goes up and, you know, where do we record that as
Correct.
parking ticket revenue? And
Right,
Sure.
There is a line, if there is a line.
there's already a revenue line.
There's already a revenue line for that, so, and it's just a matter of people either mailing them in or, and then, is there some way that somebody keeps record of if Mr. B continually parks on Preble Avenue because he doesn't want to go in that lot?
Again, your
and he
system,
gets 10 of them?
if you said, okay, it's a municipal ticket, it's a parking ticket, it's revenue for municipal, it has nothing to do with the sheriff's office. If you decide, if you go that route, my system and your system don't mesh. If you go with my system, I can put it into my system and I can say, oh, well, on this date, they were given a warning.
Right.
So then again, you have another issue that my position is 32 hours a week. So how much time?
So those are some.
Yes, definitely something to discuss.
Gotta flush out,
Yeah.
so, I mean, I can see huge problems with just automatically towing. But there's some logistical things just from a structure and a mechanical perspective that we have to talk about if we're going to issue fines.
Correct.
I think on this section we're talking about now, if we, as you just said before, we're trying for 85% compliant, let's see where we go.
Correct.
I mean, let's not make those decisions right now.
Yes.
You can't park there. Let's see if people
But you gotta,
follow
if
through.
you're gonna have signs made, you gotta tell them what the penalty is. That's the point now. We gotta put it on the
You
sign,
don't
right?
have to put it on the sign. You do not have to put it on the sign. You can say no parking from here to here. You can have no penalty for it if they do not. The problem is you're gonna have problems with a resident. What you're gonna have is, again, this car was doing this, I got a warning, or maybe you're not even gonna give out warnings. Maybe all you're looking for first is compliance. And then just kind of the 15% that ignore the sign. There are signs up now that people ignore. There are parking signs up now that people ignore. Those are probably locals. And again, your scenario of being out on the other road, you're saying, we'll educate the people. That could be a visitor, somebody that's just, and then, so there's a lot to parking, a lot to it, yes.
Well, we don't necessarily have to have the fine on there.
No.
But you guys do need to set a fine, so let's say the beach road, for example, we'll just put a no parking sign there, which they've been there for years, okay? But what is your fine going to be? Is it gonna be $25 or $50? You don't necessarily have to, like I said, put it on the sign, but back to Sharon, how are you going to enforce it?
The reason that we had considered putting the fine on the sign is that's what the sheriff indicated that he would like to see to help with enforcement.
That way the
So-
officer can say,
Right. So
you're parking here,
Right.
move, and if you don't move it, then it's a $50 fine. See the sign, it's pretty clear.
Well, that's normally what I do in the wintertime if I had a problem. I had plenty of problems last winter. I stop, I leave a note on the ordinance on their windshield, write it down in my book. I call the comm center, they record the plate number, street, and the vehicle model. And then the second time, I do the same thing, so it's recorded again, and then the third time, I normally tow it. Because it costs $100 to tow a vehicle and get it back.
Right.
So, you hate to tow, I hate to tow vehicles because there again, it costs money to get them back, the person has to go to work or school in the morning, they're out of vehicle. So 95% of the time, when I did that first warning, those vehicles never showed up again.
So,
That's a joke.
yeah, so it sounds to me like you've already had some experience in enforcing to a certain extent, and kind of calling the comm center at least gives a record that somebody's given them a warning, right?
Exactly.
And Dave, you could probably explain it as well, but there are statutes in the 29A that do warrant for snow removal in emergency situation. So that being different. If you're trying to clear a street for snow,
So that's why the
you had
comm center
authorized
involved.
that's right, it was made that
I'm the agent to do that.
he's all set to do that, so.
So
Because
somebody
it's a-
parking in July on Thomas Street, the comm center probably doesn't wanna know that.
No, and Jeff's not gonna get involved with that. because
Correct.
it's-
Right.
Correct,
It's the overnight
the
from
snow.
November to April.
Right.
Yeah.
That's his jurisdiction.
That's-
But didn't I understand you to say that once these signs go up, that the guys out patrolling, the deputies out patrolling, if they have time, you know, if they see a perpetual area that's a problem, if they,
Do,
because I don't know what the sense in putting up signs is if we got nobody patrolling.
and again, what is their concern about this vehicle? Is it in the road? Is it hindering, or is it just parked where it's not supposed to be?
I think what we need to do is have Tim and Sharon and the sheriff get together
Yeah, he definitely needs to.
and see what's gonna work for him. What's gonna, or deputy, the deputies that are, what's gonna work for them, what's gonna make it easier. Come on, Moody, sorry.
A couple of things. And number one, I don't think that the county should be burdened with collecting fine money, number one. This is our ordinance that we're developing, and I don't think the burden should go on the county to collect the fine money. But at the same time, she does have the availability
Yes.
to record this.
Yes,
All right?
that's gonna be,
I would probably want to hear from her boss whether he wants this burden or not, number one, okay? But then again, you know, we can what if this thing to death. The only thing we can do is one step at a time. Put your signs up, educate the people that, you know, these are gonna be warnings until the first of the year, but this is the way things are gonna be set as far as the parking goes in this town. Now, you're gonna get a lot of voluntary compliance, but like Sharon says, it ain't 10% anymore, it's 15 or more that are gonna try to take advantage of that. And if you're going to have tickets, which I guess you're gonna have tickets, you know, all the information that they need can be put on that ticket, whether it's a warning or whether it's a fine or what have you. But I hope we don't rush into this too fast, just one little step at a time. Start with the signs, and, you know, when Jeff's got them signs out there, see how the compliance is working from there. And then we got time between now to the first of the year, and if we need more time, we can go from January to March, or what have you here. But we, you know, it's a can of worms and a nightmare. It really is. The parking is terrible
Yeah.
to enforce, you know. And the other thing is, you know, these are your taxpayers
of course,
that
and
are paying to live in this downtown. You
Correct.
don't want to attack them too hard
correct.
before
The
you
other
warn them
problem
out.
the other thing that you would also have to is if you're gonna enforce it for this one, it has to be pretty much across the board. You may not have the time to always go across the board and be consistent with the enforcement. And again, I say baby steps.
Yeah.
And try to get voluntary compliance, better municipal parking, encourage the people that may have a bad habit of doing certain things. Just ask them.
People do not like change, and this is what we're doing. We're making a change.
Yes,
But
but again,
actually-
you're saying other people do want to change because there's, you know, so you have to,
Actually, the only change we're making is enforcement. Because most of these no parking and 2-hour parking have been there since the 70s and 80s. So it's just that our signage is old and some of it's not even visible anymore. And if we're gonna do new signs.
who reads the town ordinances as far as parking?
Sure. So if you're gonna do new signs, are you suggesting as a board that the new signs simply start out with no parking? With no, your car will be towed away, no $25 fine, just no parking, and see how that goes? Is that kind of what I'm doing?
I wouldn't want the road commissioner to go out here and make signs and then tell him next year, you're gonna add something to this sign, or
Right.
you're gonna make another
That's what I
sign,
was thinking.
you know.
Right.
Or the
as-
fines
as-
changed, if you put fines, or
Right,
any of
exactly.
it. Correct.
You know, as far as wintertime goes, everybody in this state that knows it snows in the wintertime, and you can't park on the streets at night in the wintertime.
Not every, you assume everybody knows that, but not everybody knows that.
But you got that percentage. He's got the authority to take care of that. He's done a good job of that, you know. But but I don't know if you wanna put all of this on there. If you know, violation would mean towing,
Right.
you know,
Okay, let me.
Research is probably a really good thing as well, what other towns, you may have certain intersections that you do want to be a tow-away zone immediately, because of, if you get to the end and they're parked beyond that point, you can't see, and it's clearly a hazard. Is it Madison Avenue when they park up close and they can't see, whatever. So some of them are more hazardous. You may want to do a walkthrough. You may all want to go do a ride-through, zone, check out what your areas are, what,
We have a bunch of signs left, not left over, but that were taken down on the Main Street years ago when they put the new light post up. We have some signs that have been bought over the years that have just been sitting there, so let me go through that sign, Brad, see what's in there. Most of them are no parking, nothing else but no parking on them. Let's get those up without spending minimal amount of money, and we'll go from there.
That makes sense.
I think the conversation with Tim and how you and Sharon and the sheriff have got to come too. I mean, what does he see as being necessary for that, and if he has some time?
I think making this way bigger than it really is. I mean, when I worked for the town, we did parking enforcement, not that difficult. No parking's no parking. For the winter stuff, so to speak, it starts in November. What we did in November, we started putting warnings out.
Yeah.
If it snowed a little bit, there wasn't an issue for Public Works, they got tickets. The next time, if it's sitting there and it is an issue for Public Works, we towed them. And it wasn't that we were out looking at all these, because a lot of them, they've always been here, but we never done anything with them. It's really driven by complaints, and the beach road is one good example out in East Madison in the summertime. People park everywhere, you can go out and look at signs. $10 is cheap parking at the beach. Give them their tickets and move on. I'm not sure why we're making this so difficult. We did for years. I don't know, it seems pretty straightforward.
and probably that's where half of the issue was, when the municipality left. So did the parking
Oh, absolutely.
enforcement, okay?
Absolutely.
Right, so, and now ask, oh, what do we do?
Well, I will say that in the contract for policing services, it clearly states that the deputies will enforce the ordinances of the town.
Absolutely.
So if
Yes.
the town has a parking ordinance or a ordinance that includes parking prohibitions, then that certainly falls within their purview.
However, sheriff's office, generally speaking, parking's not
Doesn't do parking.
on there. So who was teaching them or training them?
Sure.
Again, it was not a municipality. So to take over those policing services, parking wasn't discussed as far as how do we handle that. Again, so.
So one of the things that I had thought of in this whole process is, I don't want to make it, I agree, I don't want to make it more complicated than it has to be. But I do want to have an avenue that someone who feels that their livelihood is being infringed upon, they have a way to try to fix it. So if there's a business that there's renters on both sides of them on Main Street, and all the people that are renting are parking all day on Main Street, is there a way that that person can call the sheriff's office and say, hey, I'm a business, and there's been 3 cars parked here all day, and it's 2-hour parking here. Can the deputy go and enforce that?
Well, I think that's the question you have to ask the sheriff, and I think the
Correct.
sheriff has to, if that's part of the contract, then he needs to make if the enforcement of that is part of the contract, he needs to make those people available to do that. But I think that's a conversation with him. If that's happening, then let's move them. Mr. Satch?
And the 2-hour parking's gonna be the most difficult than it was when it was 1 hour, because you're gonna document that it's here at 9 o'clock, and you've gotta
Sure.
find time to get back after 10 o'clock in order to
Correct.
enforce it. That was 10 years ago, that was the problem, is getting there twice within the time limit. If it was half-hour parking or 1 hour parking, it'd be easier than 2, because if you're there at 10 and make sure you go back at noon, probably ain't gonna happen. They're gonna get doing something else. And now, like I said, Main Street was always something that the complaints you and Selectman Moody mentioned, they were the complaints 10 and 15 years ago from the same people.
Yeah.
It's one, unless you've got someone dedicated during the day, it's gonna be very difficult.
Very.
I think most of your enforcement is gonna come in from complaints. Once the people see these signs up, and they look out there, that car's parked there again and again. Once they're gonna make a complaint. Whether it be down to you, or they're gonna come in and see you about the complaint. Okay, now law enforcement has a complaint, they're gonna act on it,
Yes,
right then and there. But I think once Jeff gets those signs installed, that'll initiate a lot of the problems that we're talking about here as far as the, because you're gonna get complaints, and then the officer knows right where to go. Now, the word is gonna spread, don't worry, the first one that gets a fine, or gets his vehicle towed, God forbid if it happens, I hope it doesn't, but they say, well, they mean business, but it's gonna take one of those, or two of those, to ring the bell, so to speak. But I think a lot of it's gonna take care of itself just by the signs, to start with. And then we'll gauge it, then we'll have something to gauge it on. Right now, we don't have anything to gauge it on, but a few complaints.
no,
So just make sure we're on the same page. You're going to get the signs out of the whole sign bin
I'll
and
do an inventory tomorrow, see what we've got.
Okay, and get those up, and then you'll contact the sheriff and
Yes.
see what
We'll set
what
that.
direction he should go in, he thinks we should go in.
Yeah.
All right, does that make sense?
Okay,
All right, thank you, move forward, thank you.
bring it down.
Discuss procurement policy.
Okay, so, again, this is probably another situation where this is probably gonna be a first reading, and there'll be more readings to come. Where this came from is when we received that grant for the Jaws of Life, that came from FEMA, a federal agency. So FEMA does audits, and a couple years ago, we had a desk audit done where they basically just called you up on the phone and said, hey, send me this invoice, send me this, so I can see that you did it right. Well, this time, we had a office site visit, which was like a higher level audit. And the folks came in, and Donnie and Tammy and I sat down with them, and we went over all the details. And for 90% of it, they said, you're right on, checked every box, good job. But they had struggles with how we got the bids for the equipment. Now, in our case with this Jaws of Life equipment, we secured 3 quotes from 3 different vendors. And we followed essentially our expenditure of public funds ordinance that's already in place. So I showed this to the ladies from FEMA, and I said, this is what we did. We followed our procedure. And she kind of hemmed and hawed a little bit and said, I don't think this is complete. Your ordinance, I don't think, is complete, and it certainly doesn't meet state and federal guidelines for procurement. So that sent us down the road. She had to file her report, and in her report it says, you're incomplete in this audit until you update your procurement process. So that's where it moved from my desk to the other end of the building, as Tammy did the due diligence of putting together a procurement policy which we believe meets state and federal guidelines. It's a draft, it's not done. In fact, the draft that you have here in front of you, Tammy's already made some changes and adjustments to it. I think the big picture tonight is how we do the bid process and what are the qualifications, what qualifies for a bid. In our current ordinance, it says, and this is where she said this is kind of too open and too vague. She says, any obligation of funds exceeding $1,500 may be submitted to competitive bidding. And that's where we left it, that's where the selectmen left it. Actually, this was updated in 2013. So that kind of gives the department heads and the town manager a lot of flexibility. We may do it, and again, how do you define competitive bidding? Does competitive bidding always mean you put an advertisement in the paper? Does competitive bidding mean that you go out and talk to 3 different companies that you know? So that's why the federal government said that this was a little too vague for them. This, make your eyes bleed, because it's 11 pages of,
Oh, that's better than the federal one. And it's better than the state.
so if you turn to page 4 in this handout, and I'll let Tammy do some of the updates, I just want to touch on 2 things. On page 4, section 4, bidding requirements, it kind of sets the terms as to what you would put out to bid. And this one says for an informal price quote, a purchase of over $5,000 up to $10,000. Now here's where the select board has the power to drive this. You can change these numbers. Where do you want the bid process to start? And then there are more RFPs, that comes up on the next page. And then section 7 on page 6 is the competitive bidding procedure. And this is the process where you gather the bids, who opens the bids, do you open the bids in a public meeting, do the selectmen have to approve the bids? That was one of the things that we missed, that she brought to our attention. With the process of getting that Jaws of Life grant, once Don went out and did all his bids and did all his research and said, this is the equipment I want, technically, even according to our old policy, we should have brought that to the selectmen, and the selectmen should have approved that purchase before we made the purchase. And that would be more clearly laid out in a new procurement policy. I'll turn it over to you, Tammy, if you have any thoughts or ideas.
No, in her email, she gave me 10 outline steps that I needed to make sure that were in the procurement policy, so all 10 are in here. Another big one was conflict of interest, and that's in here too. That conflict of interest is on page 9. That is actually the state's conflict of interest that I typed into this. It wasn't in here at all, so I added the state's language in here. So we would comply with that. And then the last page is, under page 10 is the selectmen agreeing to whatever numbers we come up with. And then the last page is that every department head is going to sign, that they agree to the purchasing policy, that if there's a conflict of interest, they're gonna remove themselves, and all the steps will be followed by the chain of command. Also, there will be a formal and an informal bid review form, so kind of like a spreadsheet Tim gives you, where you have all your 2 or 3 bidders, what the values are, like Jeff gave you for the road work or the truck equipment that he wants to buy. He'll give you why he went with this, what the price per ton is, and do they have a good reputation, and can they get the insurance that we need. So there's another process too.
So, basically, you have addressed all of these
Yes.
outlined areas that we were weak in, and this is gonna make it, so if that person comes back again, it's gonna be complete the way the weaknesses were taken care of?
I already emailed her this,
Okay,
the week before, I think it was right before the 4th of July. I emailed it to her so she could review it, and I let her know that we were having a meeting tonight to discuss it. And we were having a meeting the 22nd of July also, because we have till July 24th to come up with some sort of proposal to give back to her. So that's why it's important that we discuss it tonight, come back to it on the 22nd. And
And-
then we have to give her
And
something.
what was her feedback as far as
I
what you
haven't
sent
heard
her?
back from her yet.
Oh, okay.
I'm thinking the holiday, she must be getting back this
Yeah.
week to me.
So hopefully by the next meeting, we'll have some feedback, whether this is the direction that she recommends we go in. And really to address your question, Mr. Ducharme, from what I'm reading, it's a strong recommendation that we do this. There's not a chargeback or anything like that. There's no financial penalty. However, if
Yeah.
it does, it will come back into play the next time we get a federal grant. And we apply for federal grants every year, so.
And I will tell you from experience how these federal things work. The next one that comes in will say, your policy doesn't meet my requirements, so you're going to have to rewrite it. We have 5 people at the bank that work on compliance all the time, because every regulator comes in, reads the same regulation in their book and
Right.
compares it to ours and says, oh, well, you're not in compliant here, or whatever, that it's a constant battle. That's why I asked, what is the, if you don't by, whatever the date was you said, you gotta have it done by, if you don't have it by then, what's the, what's the
I
stick
did
in the
reach out
carrot?
and say that, I did give her
Yeah.
our outline of what our procedure was going to be.
One of the things I had hoped, because I'd done this in previous audits, I hoped they would have looked at like, oh, you have a policy, and we're just gonna make sure you follow your policy. And even though we did follow our policy 90%, it was just like you said, she didn't agree with that policy being sufficient, so.
And for those, you and I were here, I'll bet you we spent 3 hours one night arguing about whether that word should have been may or shall.
Yeah, yeah,
Remember that?
I think you're right.
yeah.
So,
May or shall, it's always a.
well, and part of it was we had department heads that we trusted to do the job, and we didn't want to tie their hands by putting them into a position where we were handcuffing them to a policy that was gonna eliminate their ability to do their job on a timely basis, just because they had to go through some protracted competitive bid process. When we knew that there were gonna be 2 places you could get something done.
Right.
And so go get both bids and say, and tell us which one's the best one I'm gonna bid.
There is, in page 4 where it says bidding requirements for the formal and also for the competitive bidding, I do have 3 quotes in here. But they have a minimum in the FEMA lovely video I watched. They only require 2 at the minimum. So I'm thinking throw the 2 in there just to give us an extra leeway. So there's a couple of changes that I want to do in here after watching that.
So you'll bring that to us next meeting and we'll.
Yeah, but I want you to look,
Yeah.
at least
Yep.
look through the values, the dollar values, and at least also on your exempting yourself if there's any conflict of interest. Because that's something you guys already do when Tim gives you that vendor list at the beginning of every year, who you have relations with. And that's something that we can discuss too on each bidding process, that you should exempt yourself out from bidding if you do value or any process with them.
Well, we've already signed paperwork on that.
Right.
Saying we weren't going to.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
I agree with everything that Jack has said also, but it just boils down to, if you want any federal money, they got the whip and the hoop.
Right.
You jump through the hoop, or you're not gonna get nothing, And sometimes it creates more work than we really like to get involved in, but some things you don't have any choice, and, you're doing a good job, Tim, keep it up there.
All right, look, Selectmen's concern, Mr. Moody?
Nope, I'm okay.
Seven? Mr. Duchamp?
No, I'll say.
Almost up. Citizens' concerns? Seeing none, look for a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
I haven't heard from you.
All right, a motion and a second to go into executive session to discuss an economic development proposal pursuant to 1 MRSA Section 405-6C. All those in favor? All in favor, the motion carries. We're in executive session,
Is that you?
7:37.